The next news we hear about James is in a newspaper article which covered the Grand State Military Ball just 6 months after he is mustered out of the Army. This news event was covered by the Boston Evening Transcript on February 10, 1866 on page 3, under the caption Amusements. The list of soldiers that attended this event required 3 full columns in the write-up. The event was a reunion of all officers of the Massachusetts Volunteers who had served in the late war. It was held at the Boston Theater. The proceeds from that event were donated for the relief of deserving soldiers of the state. The identities of the people who were associated with the company of Dodge, Baldwin, was first discovered in a Boston Board of Trade journal of 1860, and within the membership chapter, the following information was obtained. Member, Baldwin, Edward, name of firm, Dodge, Baldwin and Company, place of business, 39 Franklin Street, Boston, Massachusetts. Occupation, dry goods commercial merchant. So we now know the full name of Mr. Baldwin. His first name was Edward and the address matched what James wrote down in his acceptance letter, but were other Dodges involved, and if so, who were they? Other documents uncovered were in newspaper ads, which appeared in the Boston Evening Transcript, the first one on March 11, 1861 on page 1. The ad was placed by Edward Baldwin. He placed this ad in order to sublet his home in Milton, Massachusetts, and for the respondents to apply to him at 39 Franklin Street, Boston. This ad was placed many times from 1861 through 63. The name of Edward Baldwin appears several times within Boston newspapers in 1866 and again in 67. More about these newspaper articles will be discussed later, but first let me tell you about a mortgagee sale that appeared in the Boston Journal on May 30, 1867 on page 1. This mortgagee sale of real estate, which was held by J.C. Dodge, Henry C. Dodge and Edward Baldwin. A transcription of the sale is as follows. Mortgagee sale will be sold at public auction, on the premises, on Tuesday, the 18th day of June next, at 11 o'clock in the forenoon. The well-known manufacturing estate, situated on the road from Holden to Princeton, known as the Quinnapoxet Woolen Mills. Also 3 sets of sanded machinery and the fixtures, being the same situated in said woolen mills. The estate is the same described in a mortgage deed given by Churchill to J.G. Dodge, Henry C. Dodge and Edward Baldwin, dated September 1, 1866, and recorded in the Worcester County Registry, Book 731, page 866. The sale is made by virtue of the authority contained in the mortgage deed aforesaid, the condition thereof having been broken. For particular reference may be had to Dodge, Baldwin and Company, Boston. So we now know that J.G. Dodge is James Gordon Dodge and Henry C. Dodge is Henry Cleavers Dodge, who is James's half-brother. James's father, Joshua Cleavers Dodge, married first Mary Woodbury on October 23, 1828. Mary died just 7 months after Henry was born in 1853. 4 years after his wife Mary dies, he marries Jane Maria Clark on the 7th of April 1839 in Antrim, Hillsborough, New Hampshire. This is James G.C. Dodge's family tree. James is pictured on the far left side of the tree. His brother and business partner, Henry Cleaves Dodge, is shown on the far right side of the tree. Unlike James, his brothers and sisters had close ties to France. His sister Annie, instead of coming home to the States, stayed in France and married. I also believe his other sisters Jeanette and Jane also stayed in France. His brother Joshua Cleavers Dodge married a French girl. His brothers John Frederick, Henry Cleavers, and both his brothers by different mothers, whose names were Joshua Cleavers, all are buried in France. I also believe all his sisters are also buried in France. His sister Mary Frances Dodge married Joshua Cleaves Dodge, who was the son of Nathan Brown Dodge, who was the brother of Mary Frances' father. They were first cousins. So as you can see, the name Joshua Cleavers Dodge was a very popular name used 4 times in this family. The firm of Dodge, Baldwin and Company on January 4, 1868, changes its name and partners. These two Boston newspaper articles which declares, at the close of business, on December 31, 1867, that the former company of Dodge, Baldwin and Company will reincorporate under the name of Dodge Brothers and Company. The new company partner will be J. Cleves Dodge, Henry C. Dodge and Henry A. Gowing. Edward Baldwin, formerly of Dodge, Baldwin and Company, is retired, and will continue the dry goods business at 73 Leonard Street, New York. So Edward Baldwin is out of the firm, and I believe I know the reasons for the Dodges retiring him. Their reasons for doing so started in April of last year. In a newspaper article in the Boston Advertiser on April 30, 1666, under the news headline, Local Matters Personal, where it was written, More Constabulary Raids. On Saturday forenoon, a number of state constabulary conducted a raid upon a gaming room in the Old Bite Tavern revived in Faneuil Hall Square, seized a quantity of gambling instruments, and arrested Frederick A. Draper and Edward Baldwin, the only two people present. In two more Boston newspaper articles which cover the police raid on the Bite Tavern revived in Boston, where two people were arrested, one of them was Edward Baldwin. In police court the next day, Frederick A. Draper and Edward Baldwin, the two men who were arrested by the state constabulary, were each fined $10 each for being present at a game played with cards. On a complaint for keeping a gaming house, Draper was held in $1,500 for his appearance next in court. History would prove the Dodges took the correct action in retiring Mr. Baldwin, because in 8 days from doing so Mr. Baldwin is arrested again in a similar raid at the same tavern in Boston, but this time 10 people in all were arrested. This newspaper article shown on the following page. Shown here are the second and third arrests for gambling involving Mr. Baldwin. So as you can see from these records, the Dodges acted none too soon in retiring Mr. Baldwin. Here we have a copy of James's United States passport issued on April 5, 1866. Within this passport is James's physical description. He is 26 years old, and his height is 5 feet 4 inches tall, brown hair and blue eyes. We even have his signature. Shown is William's pocket map of Boston in 1870. James was a boarder at 8 Beacon Street, Boston, Massachusetts, just 2 years before the Boston Fire of 1872, which reduced the city's commercial center to 65 acres of rubble. This fire made famous in a televised program in April 2006, entitled Damrell's Fire. What follows is a movie trailer for that movie.
Within a short period of time, it seemed as if hell had broken loose, and buildings began to actually implode.
It was tremendous heat. He was being showered with huge embers falling on him. He was seeing all the conditions he had warned against.
Damrell was a firefighter's firefighter. He knew what he believed in, and he didn't back down.
James was a member of the prestigious Union Club of Boston in 1865. James Gordon Clark Dodge, name appears on page 40 as a non-resident member, who is classified as a person who do not reside within 40 miles of Boston, and have no place of business there, may be admitted to membership in the club upon payment of half the rate of entrance fee and annual assessments. Also shown is the Union Club of Boston, as it is represented today. There are records which have indicated that James was doing business with the state of Iowa, and while in that state, James took his last breaths on this earth. James Gordon Clark Dodge died on the 14th of January 1877, in Iowa. Here is his obituary. Source, date, Tuesday, January 23, 1877. Paper, Boston Daily Advertiser, Boston, Massachusetts, Volume 129, Issue 20, page, for the death of Colonel J.G.C. Dodge at Preston, Iowa, on the 14th of this month, was wholly unexpected by his family and friends. His personal appearances and ruddy coloring were so strongly suggestive of good health, that although some of his friends were aware of the fact that for the last 6 months he had been suffering from intense pain in his heart, his deceptive appearance of health prevented them from feeling any anxiety about him. Colonel Dodge, though a young man, had shown himself to be possessed of unusual energy and rare decision of character. Born in Boston, in the year 1840, he lost his father while he was a boy. He was taken to Europe by his mother and educated in France, and for several years was a resident of Brussels. From his experience in French schools he acquired an ineradicable dislike to the French people and their character, which seemed to increase as he grew older, and became more acquainted with and fond of his native country. An ardent love for his native land was perhaps the most striking characteristic of the man, which was doubtless intensified by his abhorrence of all that was foreign. He returned to the United States a few years before the war and lived in Boston, completing his education at the Lawrence Scientific School and by travel through the northern states. When war broke out he at once joined the Army as a second lieutenant in the 19th Massachusetts Regiment, and he remained in the Army throughout the war, devoting himself heart and soul to the duties of his profession. He was promoted to be captain in the 19th Regiment, and was then transferred with the rank of major to the 61st Massachusetts Regiment, in which he remained until mustered out at the close of the war. He received the brevet of lieutenant colonel for gallant service during the war, and in few instances were these honors better deserved. He was brave to the marked degree, and on occasions his actions approached temerity. At the final attack on Petersburg he led his regiment against one of the outlying forts of that city, and although he was obliged to walk on crutches, and was distinguished by the broad sash across his breast worn as officer of the day, thus presenting an unusual mark for the bullets of the enemy, he led his men so eagerly, that he was twice forced to halt on the open field, and wait for his regiment to catch up with him. He was twice wounded and on both occasions seriously. He marched ahead of the company into Fredericksburg at Burnside's unfortunate attack upon that place, and was one of the first in the army to cross the river, and was shot just under the heart soon after he had crossed. At Gettysburg he was shot through both legs, and was disabled from the effects of the wounds for many years after the war. The exploits of the 19th Massachusetts Regiment are well known, and especially its activity and efficiency throughout McClellan's Richmond and Peninsular campaigns. Colonel Dodge served with his regiment in all the battles of that and the following campaigns, and performed his duties to the entire satisfaction of his superior officers, and was an energetic, enterprising, brave and intelligent officer. Since the war Colonel Dodge has resided in Boston, and has been occupied with the care of a large amount of property as trustee, and has been an active Freemason and an enthusiastic member of the Grand Army of the Republic. He was essentially an energetic man, and was untiring in his favorite pursuits. His frame, thought slight in appearance, was really indefatigable. He was a faithful friend, a man of high sense of honor, of untarnished morality, of marked decision of character and of strong prejudices. His firmness of character sometimes seemed to prevent him seeing but one side to a question, and at times he clung to an honest conviction with a pertinacity bordering upon obstinacy. He was rigid in his ideas of his own duties, and as unyielding in his belief of the virtue of the Republican Party. By his death his family and friends have suffered a severe loss. In preparing this presentation I have used, in whole, his obituary to describe the man and his very short life, which is so familiar to many of our Dodge ancestors. James was buried in Nashua Cemetery, Hillsborough County, New Hampshire. His mother Jane Clark Dodge was also laid to rest with her son in 1913, and their names appear on one side of the family headstone. The other side lists his father Joshua and his first wife Mary Woodbury Dodge. His headstone side of the monument reads as follows, can't read the top inscription. Lieutenant Colonel James G. C. Dodge, born in Boston February 9, 1840, died January 14, 1877. The other side of the monument inscription reads as follows, Joshua C. Dodge died July 1, 1853, age 51 years, Mary W. wife of J. C. Dodge died May 3, 1836, aged 30 years.